I never thought my quiet suburban life would turn into a nightmare when I discovered the truth about my neighbor. For 3 years, I'd lived next door to Marcus, a man who claimed to be a grieving widower. I'd watched him tend his garden alone, seen the sad smile he wore when neighbors asked about his late wife, and I'd even brought him casseroles during the holidays because I felt sorry for him. But everything I thought I knew shattered the day a woman showed up at his door, a woman who was supposed to be 6 feet under. The moment I saw her standing there, alive and furious, my blood ran cold. Because what she told me next didn't just expose Marcus's lies, it pulled me into a web of deception so twisted that I questioned everything about the quiet street I called home. This isn't just a story about a liar. It's about secrets that destroy lives, trust that crumbles in an instant, and the terrifying realization that the people we think we know might be strangers wearing familiar faces. What I uncovered changed everything, not just for Marcus, but for me, for our neighborhood, and for a woman who'd been erased from existence. By the time you hear what really happened, you'll understand why I can never look at my neighbors the same way again. My name is Sarah Chen, and I've always considered myself a good judge of character. At 34, I'd built a comfortable life as a freelance graphic designer in the suburbs of Portland. I worked from home, which meant I saw everything that happened on Maple Street. Every package delivery, every argument, every late-night visitor. I wasn't nosy, just observant. That's what I told myself anyway. The truth is, when you work alone all day, the comings and goings of your neighbors become a kind of background noise that keeps you company. Marcus Holloway moved into the house next door in the spring of 2021. He was 42, tall and lean with graying temples that gave him a distinguished look. He drove a sensible Honda Accord and kept his lawn immaculate. Within a week of moving in, he'd introduced himself to everyone on the block, always with that same sad, apologetic smile. "I'm Marcus," he'd said when he knocked on my door that first Saturday. "Just moved in next door. I'm sorry I'm not more sociable. I lost my wife 2 years ago and I'm still adjusting." I remember feeling a pang of sympathy. He looked genuinely broken, the kind of grief that sits in your shoulders and dims your eyes. "I'm so sorry for your loss," I'd said, and I meant it. Over the following months, Marcus became a fixture in our neighborhood. He was quiet, kept to himself mostly, but always friendly. He'd wave when he saw you, help carry groceries if you looked like you were struggling, and once he fixed Mrs. Patterson's fence without being asked. Everyone liked Marcus. Everyone felt sorry for Marcus. He was the tragic widower who'd moved here for a fresh start, trying to outrun his grief. I'd catch him sometimes, standing in his backyard at sunset, staring at nothing with a beer in his hand. Once I brought him dinner because it had been the anniversary of his wife's death, or so he'd mentioned to the neighborhood book club. He'd thanked me with tears in his eyes. Looking back now, I wonder if those were tears of guilt or just another layer of the performance. 3 years passed. Marcus remained the same, polite, distant, forever mourning. Then came that Tuesday in October, the day that ripped away every illusion. I was working on a logo design for a client, frustration mounting because nothing looked right. I'd been staring at my screen for 2 hours when the doorbell rang. The interruption was almost welcome, but when I opened the door, I found myself face to face with a woman I'd never seen before. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city in the comments below. I love knowing where my stories are reaching, and I read every single comment. It means the world to me to connect with you all. Now, back to what happened next. She was around 40 with auburn hair pulled back in a tight ponytail and eyes that burned with an intensity that made me step back instinctively. She wore jeans and a leather jacket, and she looked like she'd been driving for days. "Does Marcus Holloway live next door?" she asked without preamble. Her voice was sharp, cutting. I nodded, suddenly wary. "Who's asking?" "Someone who's supposed to be dead." She pushed past me before I could respond, striding toward Marcus's house with purpose. I stood frozen in my doorway, her words echoing in my head. Someone who's supposed to be dead. My heart was pounding as I watched her march up Marcus's front steps and hammer on his door. She didn't knock politely. She pounded like the police serving a warrant. I should have gone back inside. I should have minded my own business. But something about the fury in her movements and the impossible things she'd said kept me rooted to the spot. Marcus opened his door, and I watched his face transform. The color drained so fast I thought he might faint. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. "Surprised to see me, Marcus?" the woman said, her voice carrying across the yards. "I bet you are. Did you really think I'd stay gone forever?" "Vanessa," he finally managed, the word barely a whisper, but I heard it. And in that moment, everything I thought I knew began to crumble. Vanessa, that was his wife's name. The wife he'd buried, the wife he'd mourned. Except she was standing right there, very much alive and absolutely furious. I must have made some sound because they both turned to look at me. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "You're the neighbor? The one who's been bringing him casseroles and feeling sorry for the poor widower?" There was venom in her voice, but it wasn't directed at me. She was looking at Marcus, and the hatred in that gaze could have melted steel. "You should know what kind of man you've been pitying." Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out strangled. "Vanessa, please, let's talk inside. This isn't what? Isn't appropriate? Isn't the right time?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You made everyone think I was dead, Marcus. You held a funeral. You cried at my gravestone, and you've been living here playing the tragic hero while I've been..." She stopped abruptly, her jaw clenching. "No, we're not doing this on your terms anymore." By now, other neighbors had started to appear. Mrs. Patterson was peering through her curtains. The Rodriguezes had come out onto their porch. Even old Mr. Chen from 3 houses down had his front door open, watching with undisguised curiosity. Vanessa turned to address all of us, her voice rising. "My name is Vanessa Holloway, and I'm supposed to be dead. My husband held a funeral for me 3 years ago. But as you can see, I'm very much alive, and I'm here to tell you all exactly what kind of monster you've been living next to." Marcus moved then, trying to reach for her arm, but she jerked away violently. "Don't you dare touch me. Don't you dare." She looked back at the gathering neighbors, at me standing frozen in my doorway, and something in her expression shifted. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was desperation, exhaustion, and a determination that seemed to come from somewhere deep and unbreakable. "He didn't just lie about me being dead," she said, her voice cracking. "He's the reason I disappeared in the first place. And the secret he's been keeping? It's so much worse than any of you could imagine." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat, feel the October wind raising goosebumps on my arms. Marcus stood in his doorway, his face now blank, empty of all emotion. It was somehow more frightening than panic would have been. "Sarah," Vanessa said, and I realized she was talking to me. "May I come in? I think it's time someone heard the whole truth, and something tells me you're the kind of person who pays attention." I should have said no. I should have closed my door and called the police and let them sort out whatever twisted situation was unfolding. But I didn't, because I'd spent 3 years feeling sorry for Marcus. 3 years believing his grief was real, and I needed to know what I'd been so wrong about. "Yes," I heard myself say. "Come in." As Vanessa walked toward my house, Marcus finally spoke, and his voice was different now. Cold, controlled, the voice of someone who'd been wearing a mask and had just let it slip. "You're making a mistake, Sarah. You don't know what she is, what she's capable of." Vanessa stopped, turned back to face him. "No, Marcus, they don't know what you're capable of, but they're about to learn." She walked into my house, and I followed her inside, closing the door on Marcus's hollow stare and the shocked faces of my neighbors. As I turned the lock, I had the distinct feeling that I was sealing myself in with something dangerous. But the real danger I was about to discover had been living next door all along. And what Vanessa was about to tell me would make me question everything I thought I understood about trust, truth, and the secrets people bury when they think no one's watching. Vanessa stood in my living room, her hands shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. Now that we were inside, away from the audience of neighbors and Marcus's cold stare, she looked less like an avenging fury and more like someone who'd been running on pure adrenaline for so long that stopping felt dangerous. "Do you have something to drink?" she asked, her voice rough. "Water? Coffee? Honestly, whiskey would be ideal, but I'll take what I can get." I led her to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of water because my hands were shaking too, then added a generous splash of bourbon to both without asking. We were past the point of pleasantries. She drank half her glass in one long swallow, closed her eyes, and exhaled slowly. When she opened them again, they were rimmed with red but dry. She'd cried all her tears out long ago. I don't even know where to start, she said, setting the glass down on my counter with a soft click. Do you start with the lie, the betrayal, the moment you realized your whole life was a fiction? Or do you start at the end, with the woman who's supposed to be buried in Riverside Cemetery but is standing in a stranger's kitchen instead? Start wherever you need to, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I'm listening, she nodded, seeming to gather herself. Marcus and I met 15 years ago. I was 27, working as a nurse at Providence Hospital. He was 30, already making good money as a software engineer. It was a whirlwind romance, the kind you see in movies. He was charming, attentive, romantic. He made me feel like I was the center of his universe. She paused, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. That should have been my first red flag. Nobody makes you the center of their universe unless they want to control which way you orbit. I felt a chill run down my spine. I'd heard this story before, or versions of it, the charming man who slowly reveals himself to be something else entirely. But I hadn't expected it from Marcus, not from the quiet, grieving widower who fixed fences and kept to himself. We got married after 8 months, Vanessa continued. Too fast, everyone said. But we were in love, or I thought we were. For the first few years, it was good. Really good. We bought a house in Lake Oswego, talked about having kids. I worked night shifts at the hospital. He worked from home most days. It seemed perfect. She took another drink, and I noticed her hand was steadier now. Talking seemed to be helping, or maybe it was the bourbon. Things started changing about 5 years in. Little things at first. He'd get upset if I made plans without telling him first. He wanted to know where I was all the time, who I was with. He'd check my phone, said it was because he loved me and wanted to be close to me. I convinced myself it was flattering, that it meant he cared. It wasn't flattering, I said quietly. She met my eyes. No, it wasn't. But by the time I realized that, I was in too deep. He'd isolated me so gradually I didn't even notice. My friends stopped calling because I was never available. My family lived in Boston, and somehow we never had time or money to visit them. It was just me and Marcus, and he made sure I understood that he was all I needed. I wanted to ask why she didn't leave, but I knew that question revealed nothing but ignorance. Leaving is never simple. Leaving is often the most dangerous thing you can do. The violence started small too, Vanessa said, and her voice had gone flat, factual. This was the part she'd told before, maybe to therapists or lawyers or police officers who'd looked at her with skepticism. A grab that was too hard, a shove during an argument. He'd always apologize after, cry, tell me he loved me so much it scared him. I stayed because I thought I could fix it. I thought if I just loved him enough, tried hard enough, it would go back to how it was in the beginning. She laughed bitterly. That's the joke, right? The beginning was a lie. He was always this person, he just hid it well. I refilled our glasses and we moved to the living room. Through my front window, I could see Marcus's house. The door was closed now, but I knew he was in there, knew he was aware of what was happening. The breaking point came 3.5 years ago, Vanessa said, settling onto my couch. I'd been planning to leave for months. I'd opened a secret bank account, a few $100s at a time skimmed from grocery money. I'd been scanning important documents, saving them to a hidden email account. I'd even reached out to a domestic violence shelter, had a plan in place. Her hands clenched into fists. Marcus found out. I still don't know how. Maybe he'd put spyware on my phone, or maybe he just knew me well enough to sense the shift. But he found out. The room felt too small suddenly, the air too thick. I knew whatever came next would be bad, but I wasn't prepared for how bad. He confronted me one night when I came home from work. He'd found the bank statements, printed out my emails with the shelter. He was calm. That's what scared me the most. He wasn't angry or violent. He was just calm. Vanessa's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He told me that if I tried to leave him, he'd kill me. Not in a heat of passion way, not a threat made in anger. He laid it out like a business plan. He said he'd make it look like an accident, or like I'd run off and no one would question it because he was so respected, so normal. He said he'd already thought it through. My mouth had gone dry. What did you do? I ran, she said simply. That night after he fell asleep, I grabbed what I could and I ran. No plan, no preparation, just pure terror. I drove to Seattle, ditched my car, bought a bus ticket with cash to Phoenix. I disappeared. But Marcus told everyone you died, I said, trying to piece it together. He held a funeral. Vanessa's smile was grim. That's the genius of it, isn't it? I disappeared, and instead of letting people ask questions, instead of being the husband whose wife mysteriously vanished, he took control of the narrative. He reported me missing, played the distraught husband for a few weeks, then claimed my body had been found after a car accident in California. Closed casket funeral, of course. But how? I asked, my mind reeling. You can't just fake someone's death. There are death certificates, autopsies. You'd be surprised what you can fake with the right connections and enough money, she said. Marcus had both. He worked in tech, knew people who could create convincing digital trails. As for the body, I have theories but no proof. Maybe there wasn't one. Maybe the casket was empty and no one thought to check. Or maybe she trailed off, and the implications hung in the air like poison. For 3 years I've been living under a different name, working cash jobs, moving every few months, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots or show up on anyone's radar. I couldn't contact my family because I knew he'd be watching them. I couldn't go to the police because who would believe me? I was legally dead and Marcus was the grieving widower. What changed? I asked. Why come back now? Vanessa pulled something from her jacket pocket. It was a newspaper clipping, worn from being folded and unfolded many times. She handed it to me. It was from the Portland Tribune, dated 2 months ago. A small article about Marcus Holloway receiving a community service award for his volunteer work with a youth mentoring program. He's working with kids now, Vanessa said, and her voice shook with rage, teaching them computer skills, being a role model. And all I could think was, what if there's a mother in that program who reminds him of me? What if some kid says the wrong thing and triggers him? I disappeared to save myself. But what about the next person? What about the next victim? She stood up, began pacing. I've spent 3 years being afraid. 3 years looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows. But seeing that article, I realized something. I'm already dead according to the world. What else can he take from me? So I came back. Not to reclaim my old life, that's gone, but to make sure everyone knows the truth about Marcus Holloway. I looked at the clipping, at Marcus's smile in the photo. He looked exactly like the man I knew. Kind, humble, still touched by sadness. The perfect mask. I believe you, I said, and Vanessa's eyes widened slightly. I don't know why, but I do. Maybe because I've spent 3 years watching him, and there was always something just slightly off, something I couldn't put my finger on. Thank you, she whispered, and I saw tears finally spill over. You have no idea what it means to have someone believe me without evidence, without proof. Just believe. What do we do now? I asked. Because Marcus isn't going to just let this go. You showing up alive ruins everything for him. Vanessa wiped her eyes, and when she looked at me again, there was steel in her gaze. Now we fight back. Because I may have come here to expose him, but what I'm about to tell you goes so much deeper than a faked death and an abusive marriage. She leaned forward, her voice dropping, even though we were alone. The secret Marcus is keeping isn't just about me. It's about money, lots of it, that went missing from his company around the time I died. It's about a business partner who also disappeared under mysterious circumstances. And it's about a safety deposit box that I managed to access before I ran, filled with documents that could put Marcus away for decades if they ever saw the light of day. My heart was racing. Where are these documents? Safe, she said. Hidden somewhere Marcus would never think to look. But I need help getting them, and I need help making sure the truth comes out in a way that can't be buried or explained away. She held out her hand. So Sarah Chen, are you willing to help a dead woman bring down a monster? I looked at her hand, thought about Marcus next door, thought about 3 years of lies and manipulation. I thought about the casseroles I'd made, the sympathy I'd offered, the way I'd smiled at a man who'd terrorized someone into disappearing. And I thought about what kind of person I wanted to be, someone who looked away, or someone who helped. I took her hand. Let's do it. Vanessa's grip was strong, and when she smiled, it was the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. Good, because tomorrow, we're going to get those documents, and then Marcus Holloway is going to learn what happens when the dead come back to life. As she released my hand, I glanced out the window one more time. Marcus's living room light was on, and I could see his silhouette standing perfectly still, watching my house, watching and waiting. And I realized with a cold certainty that we'd just declared war on someone who'd already proven he was willing to kill to keep his secrets. The question wasn't whether Marcus would come after us. The question was how long we had before he did. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every creak of my house settling, every car that passed on the street, every shadow that moved across my bedroom wall felt like a threat. Vanessa was staying in a motel across town. refusing my offer of the guest room because she didn't want to put me in more danger than she already had. "If Marcus decides to do something tonight," she'd said before leaving, "I don't want you in the crossfire." After she left, I'd locked every door and window, checked them twice, then sat in my darkened living room watching Marcus's house. His lights stayed on until nearly 3 in the morning. I imagined him in there, pacing, planning, calculating his next move. He had to be panicking. His carefully constructed life, 3 years in the making, had imploded in a matter of hours. The Marcus I thought I knew, the gentle widower, would be devastated and confused. But that Marcus didn't exist. The real Marcus was dangerous, methodical, and now he was cornered. Cornered animals were the most vicious. When the sun finally rose, I was exhausted, but wired on adrenaline and coffee. Vanessa had told me to act normal, to go about my day as if nothing had changed. "Don't give him any reason to think you're scared," she'd said. "Men like Marcus feed on fear. But how do you act normal when normal has been revealed as a lie?" I took a shower, got dressed, sat down at my computer to work on the logo I'd abandoned yesterday. Yesterday, when my biggest problem was a difficult client and creative block. That felt like a lifetime ago. Around 9, my doorbell rang. My heart jumped into my throat, but when I peered through the window, I saw Mrs. Patterson from across the street, not Marcus. I opened the door to find her clutching her cardigan around herself, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Sarah, dear, I hope I'm not intruding," she said in the tone of someone who absolutely was intruding and didn't care. "But I simply have to know what happened yesterday. That woman who claims to be Marcus's dead wife, could she really be?" "I don't know what to tell you, Mrs. Patterson," I said, which was technically true. I didn't know what I was allowed to tell anyone yet. Vanessa and I hadn't discussed strategy beyond getting the documents. "It's a complicated situation." "Well, I should say so. Marcus has been beside himself. He came to my house last night, asked if I'd seen where that woman went. Poor man looked absolutely distraught. He said she's mentally ill, that she's been stalking him for years, claiming to be his deceased wife, some kind of obsession." The way Mrs. Patterson said it, with such conviction, made my stomach turn. Of course Marcus had already started damage control. Of course he'd planted seeds of doubt, painted Vanessa as crazy rather than credible. It's what abusers always did. "He seemed very sincere," Mrs. Patterson continued. "And you know, I've lived across from him for 3 years. He's been nothing but kind. Helped me with my fence, drove me to the pharmacy when my car was in the shop. I just can't imagine him being the type of man who'd fake his wife's death." "No one ever can," I said quietly. "That's how they get away with it." Mrs. Patterson's expression shifted, became cooler. "You believe her then? This strange woman who appeared out of nowhere?" "I believe everyone deserves to be heard," I said carefully. "And I believe things aren't always what they seem." She pursed her lips, clearly disappointed that I wasn't taking Marcus's side. "Well, I suppose the truth will come out eventually. These things always do." After she left, I watched her hurry back across the street, no doubt to report our conversation to the other neighbors. Battle lines were being drawn, I realized. Marcus had 3 years of goodwill built up, 3 years of being the sympathetic figure. Vanessa was the outsider, the disruptor, the crazy woman making wild accusations. I knew which side most people would choose, at least initially. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "It's V. Meet me at the address I'm sending in 1 hour. Come alone. Make sure you're not followed. Bring your phone, but keep it off until we're done. Can't be too careful." The address came through a moment later. It was in Oregon City, about 30 minutes away. I spent the next half hour trying to work, failing, and watching out the window. Marcus left his house at 10, got in his car and drove away. I waited 15 minutes to make sure he was really gone, then grabbed my keys and headed out. Following someone is harder in real life than in movies. I didn't have a tactical team or fancy equipment. All I could do was vary my speed, take a few random turns, and hope that if Marcus was having me followed, I'd notice. By the time I pulled up to the address Vanessa had given me, a storage facility on the outskirts of Oregon City, I was reasonably sure I was alone. Vanessa was waiting by Unit 247, looking like she hadn't slept either. "Any trouble?" she asked as I approached. "No. Mrs. Patterson came by this morning, though. Marcus has been making the rounds, telling everyone I'm mentally ill and stalking him." Vanessa's jaw clenched. "Of course he has. It's straight out of the abuser's playbook. Discredit the victim before anyone can believe her story." She pulled out a key and opened the storage unit. Inside was sparse. A few boxes, a duffel bag, and a small safe. This is everything I managed to take when I ran. Not much to show for 15 years of life, is it? I didn't know what to say to that, so I stayed quiet as she knelt beside the safe and began working the combination. When I left, I wasn't thinking clearly, she said as she worked. But I'd been planning my escape for months, remember? Part of that plan involved insurance. I knew Marcus was involved in something shady at work. I'd seen emails, overheard phone calls, so I started documenting everything. The safe clicked open. Inside were several thumb drives, a stack of papers, and a passport in a name that wasn't Vanessa Holloway. Marcus's company, Techdyne Solutions, was developing cybersecurity software for government contracts, Vanessa explained, pulling out one of the thumb drives. Worth millions. But about 6 months before I ran, I noticed Marcus was stressed in a new way. Not angry stressed, but anxious. He was having a lot of late-night calls with his business partner, a man named David Chen. I perked up. Chen? Like me? No relation as far as I know. It's a common name. Anyway, David was the technical genius. Marcus handled the business side. But they were arguing about something and Marcus was losing sleep over it. I started paying closer attention. She handed me a folder. Inside were printed emails, financial statements, and what looked like contracts with government agencies. Marcus was embezzling from the company, Vanessa said flatly. He'd created shell corporations, was funneling money through them. But David figured it out. They had a huge fight. I heard it one night when David came to the house. David threatened to go to the authorities. What happened to him? I asked, though I was afraid I knew the answer. David Chen disappeared 4 years ago. Officially, he just left town, abandoned the company and his stake in it. No one suspected foul play because he left a note, emptied his bank accounts, even sent a few emails saying he was going off the grid to find himself. Vanessa's eyes met mine. But I have emails from Marcus's personal account, from before David disappeared, talking about solving the David problem and making sure loose ends are tied up. My hands were shaking as I looked through the documents. This is evidence of fraud, possibly murder. It gets worse, Vanessa said. After David disappeared, Marcus took full control of the company. He sold it 6 months later for $20 million. But here's the thing, the technology they sold, it doesn't work. Marcus knew it didn't work. He'd been falsifying test results, lying to investors and government agencies. The buyers discovered it about a year after the sale, tried to get their money back. But by then Marcus had hidden it so well they couldn't touch him. She pulled out another folder, this one thicker. I have proof of all of it. The falsified data, the shell corporations, communications about David. And I have this. She held up a small recording device. The night Marcus threatened to kill me if I left, I recorded it, every word. Him detailing how he'd make my death look accidental, how he'd already researched it, how no one would ever suspect him because he was so careful, so respectable. I sat back on my heels, overwhelmed. Why didn't you go to the police with this when you first ran? Because I was terrified, Vanessa said simply. And because Marcus has connections. He'd sold that company to people with power, people who wouldn't want it known that they'd been duped. If I'd gone to the authorities and Marcus had made me disappear before charges were filed, all this evidence would have disappeared with me. She began packing the documents back into the safe. But now I'm already dead. The stakes have changed. If something happens to me now, people will ask questions. You'll ask questions. And these documents are backed up in 3 different locations, with instructions to be released if I disappear again. So, what's the plan? I asked. Vanessa closed the safe and looked at me. We go to the FBI. Not local police, they can be influenced or paid off. Federal agents. We hand over everything and we make sure Marcus doesn't have time to run or cover his tracks. When? Tomorrow. I'm meeting with an agent I've been in contact with. He's part of a white-collar crime unit, been investigating Techdyne independently. He doesn't know about me yet, about the fact that I'm alive, but once he sees this evidence, she smiled grimly. Marcus is done. It should have been reassuring, having a plan, but something was nagging at me. What about tonight? Marcus knows you're in town, knows you've talked to me. What's stopping him from running now? Nothing, Vanessa admitted. That's the gamble, but I don't think he will. Marcus's ego is too big. He thinks he's smarter than everyone else, thinks he can talk his way out of anything. He'll stick around to try to discredit me, to protect his reputation. That's what men like him do. She stood up, dusted off her jeans. But just in case I'm wrong, I need you to do something for me. If anything happens to me tonight, if I don't show up tomorrow morning, you take these documents to the FBI yourself. Can you do that? The weight of what she was asking settled over me. Yes, but nothing's going to happen to you. Probably not, Vanessa agreed. But I've learned the hard way that you can't be too careful with men like Marcus. We left the storage unit, and I helped her load the safe into the trunk of her rental car. As we stood in the parking lot, she turned to me. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. For all you know, I could be exactly what Marcus says I am. A mentally ill stalker with an obsession. I don't think you are, I said. But honestly, even if there was a chance you were lying, I'd rather help you and be wrong than ignore you and let Marcus get away with it. Vanessa's eyes glistened. Thank you. You have no idea what it means to not be alone in this. We parted ways, and I drove home in a daze. When I pulled onto my street, I saw Marcus's car in his driveway. He was home. As I parked, he emerged from his house and walked toward me. My first instinct was to get inside and lock the door, but I forced myself to act normal. Normal Sarah wouldn't be afraid of Marcus. Normal Sarah would be confused, maybe concerned, but not afraid. Sarah, he said as I got out of my car. His voice was gentle, sad, the voice of the man I'd known for 3 years. Do you have a minute? I'd really like to explain what happened yesterday. Every alarm bell in my head was ringing, but I made myself nod. Sure, Marcus. Do you want to come in? Actually, would you mind coming to my place? I've made coffee and I have something I'd like to show you. Something that will help you understand what's really going on. No, absolutely not. Every instinct screamed at me not to go into his house, not to be alone with him where no one could see. But I thought about Vanessa, about her bravery in coming back, and I thought about the documents we'd just retrieved. Okay, I heard myself say. Let me just grab my phone. Oh, that's all right, Marcus said quickly. This won't take long, and honestly, I'd prefer if we kept this conversation private. No recordings or anything like that. I just want you to hear my side without it being taken out of context. There it was, the red flag, bright and waving. He wanted me in his house alone without any way to record what happened or call for help. Actually, I'd feel better bringing my phone, I said, keeping my voice light. You know how it is, always expecting work calls. Something flickered across Marcus's face, gone so fast I almost missed it. Annoyance? Anger? But then the mask was back, the sad smile in place. Of course, I understand. You know what? Why don't we talk out here instead? I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. He gestured to his porch, and I felt a small relief. At least out here, we'd be visible to the neighbors. That works, I said. We walked to his porch, and he held the door open. I'll just grab that coffee I mentioned. You sit, make yourself comfortable. Before I could respond, he disappeared inside, leaving me standing on his porch. I heard him moving around inside, cabinet doors opening and closing. My phone was in my pocket, fully charged. I pulled it out, quickly texted Vanessa, at Marcus's house. If you don't hear from me in 30 minutes, call police. I hit send just as Marcus returned with 2 steaming mugs. He handed one to me with that same gentle smile. Cream. No sugar, right? I remember from the times you've brought me dinner. The fact that he'd remembered how I took my coffee felt menacing now instead of thoughtful. How much else had he been observing about me over the years? Thanks, I said, not drinking. I placed the mug on the porch railing. So what did you want to explain? Marcus settled into one of his porch chairs, cradling his own mug. He looked tired, defeated even. I suppose you think I'm a monster now. That woman yesterday, Vanessa, she's very convincing. She's had years to perfect her story. Is she really your wife? I asked directly. No point dancing around it. She was, Marcus said quietly. We were married for 9 years. But Sarah, she's not well. She suffers from borderline personality disorder, severe paranoia, and during our marriage, she had multiple psychotic breaks. I loved her. God knows I tried to help her, but she became dangerous, to herself and to others. He paused, took a sip of coffee. The performance was masterful. If I hadn't spent the morning looking at evidence of his crimes, if I hadn't seen Vanessa's eyes when she talked about running for her life, I might have believed him. 3.5 years ago, Vanessa had the worst episode I'd ever seen. She became convinced I was trying to kill her, that I was part of some vast conspiracy. She attacked me with a knife, Sarah. I had to physically restrain her until the police came. They took her to a psychiatric facility for evaluation. And then what happened? I asked, my voice neutral. She escaped, Marcus said, and now his voice cracked with what seemed like genuine emotion. Just walked out one night when the orderlies weren't watching. I searched for her, filed missing person reports, hired private investigators. 6 months later, they found a body. Female, right age, badly decomposed after a car accident in Northern California. The dental records matched. But it wasn't her, I said. Marcus's eyes met mine, and for just a second I saw something cold there. Then it was gone. I thought it was. I held a funeral, mourned my wife, tried to move on. But now she's back, and she's still suffering from the same delusions. Sarah, I'm genuinely worried about what she might do. To herself, to me, or to people who try to help her. He leaned forward earnestly. I saw you let her into your house yesterday. I'm concerned for your safety. People in Vanessa's mental state can be unpredictable. They can seem perfectly rational until something triggers them, and then he let the implication hang. It was a warning and a threat wrapped in concern. I appreciate you looking out for me, I said carefully. But I'm a grown woman. I can assess risk for myself. Of course, Marcus said quickly. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. I've watched you over the years, Sarah. You're kind. You see the best in people. Those are wonderful qualities. But they can also make you vulnerable to manipulation. The way he said, I've watched you, made my skin crawl. Did you ever think about the fact that your dental records might have been switched? I asked, unable to help myself. That maybe Vanessa didn't die because she was never in that car accident? Marcus's expression didn't change, but his grip on his coffee mug tightened slightly. That's exactly the kind of paranoid thinking Vanessa struggles with. Sarah, dental records don't just get switched. We're talking about official police investigations, medical examiners, death certificates. The conspiracy would have to involve dozens of people. Unless it only involved one person with the right skills and connections, I said. Now his mask slipped just for a moment. The warmth left his eyes, replaced by something calculating. What has she told you? That you're not who you pretend to be, I said, standing up. This conversation had gone on long enough. Thank you for the coffee, Marcus, but I should get back to work. Sarah, wait. He stood too, and I was suddenly very aware of how much bigger he was than me, how isolated we were despite being on his front porch. I need to know what she told you for your own protection. If she's making accusations, I need to be able to address them, to show you proof that they're false. She didn't make accusations, I said, backing toward the steps. She just told me her story, and I'm going to let the police sort out who's telling the truth. The police, Marcus repeated softly. Has she gone to them already? I realized my mistake immediately. I just confirmed that Vanessa had more than accusations, that she was planning to involve authorities. I don't know her plans, I said quickly. Like I said, I'm staying out of it. But the damage was done. Marcus knew now that the threat was real, that Vanessa wasn't just going to make noise and disappear again. I see, he said, and his voice had gone cold. The friendly neighbor was completely gone now, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Sarah, I really hoped you'd be smarter than this. I've always liked you. You're quiet. You mind your own business. You're not like Mrs. Patterson, always gossiping and interfering. But you've let Vanessa poison you against me. I haven't let anyone poison me, I said, my heart pounding. I'm just trying to understand what's going on. What's going on is that a mentally ill woman is trying to destroy my life because she can't accept that I moved on after her death, and you're helping her do it. He stepped closer and I stepped back, nearly missing the porch step. Do you know what happens to people who interfere in things they don't understand, Sarah? The threat was barely veiled now. I pulled out my phone. I think I should go. Put the phone away, Marcus said, his voice sharp. We're not done talking. Yes, we are. I held the phone up so he could see the screen. And if you take one more step toward me, I'm calling 911. For a long moment, we stood frozen. I could see him calculating, weighing his options. The neighborhood was quiet, but it was the middle of the day. People were home. Mrs. Patterson might be watching from her window right now. Finally, Marcus stepped back, and the mask slid back into place so smoothly it was chilling. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. I'm just stressed, worried about Vanessa and what she might do. Please forgive me. I need to go, I repeated, and I walked down the steps across his lawn to my own house. I didn't run, though every instinct screamed at me to. I walked calmly, deliberately, phone in hand. I felt his eyes on me the entire way. Once inside with the door locked, I collapsed against it, shaking. My phone buzzed. Vanessa, you okay? Got your text? I'm fine, I typed back. But we need to move up the timeline. He knows you're going to the police. He's dangerous, V. More dangerous than you said. 3 dots appeared then. FBI meeting is now at 3 p.m. today. Can you be there? I'll send address. I need you to corroborate that I'm alive, that you've seen me. Your testimony matters. I'll be there, I responded. The address came through. FBI Field Office, downtown Portland. In less than 4 hours, we'd be handing over everything to federal agents. Marcus's carefully constructed life would crumble. But 4 hours was a long time. A lot could happen in 4 hours. I looked out my window and saw Marcus standing in his driveway, phone to his ear, pacing. He was making calls, probably to a lawyer, maybe to whoever had helped him fake Vanessa's death, or maybe he was planning something else. Something that would stop Vanessa and me from ever making it to that FBI office. I thought about calling the police now, asking for protection, but what would I tell them? That my neighbor had been vaguely threatening? That his supposedly dead wife was alive and we had evidence of his crimes? They'd think I was crazy, or they'd tell me to come file a report, which would take hours and achieve nothing. No, the FBI meeting was the play. We just had to survive until then. My phone rang, making me jump. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Sarah Chen? A man's voice, unfamiliar. Yes? My name is Special Agent Thomas Rivera with the FBI. I understand you're planning to meet with us this afternoon regarding Marcus Holloway and Vanessa Holloway. My mouth went dry. How did you get my number? Mrs. Holloway provided it. She also provided some initial documentation that we've been reviewing. Ms. Chen, I need to ask you some questions about your interactions with both parties, but I think it's best we do this in person. Can you confirm you'll be at our office at 3? Yes, I'll be there. Good. And Ms. Chen? Until then, I'd advise you to stay away from Mr. Holloway and to remain in a public place if possible. Based on what we've seen so far, there may be credible threats that we need to assess. So even the FBI was taking this seriously. That should have been reassuring, but instead, it drove home just how much danger we were actually in. Understood, I said. After we hung up, I grabbed my laptop and keys, threw some clothes in a bag, and left my house. I wasn't staying there alone, not with Marcus next door and 4 hours to kill. I drove to a crowded coffee shop in downtown Portland, claimed a table near the window where I could see anyone coming, and tried to work. But I couldn't focus. I kept watching the door, kept checking my phone, kept waiting for something terrible to happen. At 2:30, I packed up and headed to the FBI office. I arrived early, went through security, and was escorted to a conference room where Vanessa was already waiting with Agent Rivera and another agent, a woman who introduced herself as Agent Sarah Patel. Thank you for coming, Ms. Chen, Rivera said. He was in his 50s with graying hair and sharp eyes that had probably seen every kind of criminal behavior. We've been reviewing the materials Mrs. Holloway provided, and frankly, this is one of the more complex cases we've encountered in a while. Complex how? I asked. Vanessa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She looked scared but determined. Agent Patel spoke up. Because everything Mrs. Holloway has told us checks out. The financial fraud, the falsified test results, the disappearance of David Chen. We've actually had an open investigation into Techdyne Solutions for 2 years, but we could never find enough evidence to pursue charges. What Mrs. Holloway has provided changes everything. So you can arrest him? I asked hopefully. It's not that simple, Rivera said. Some of this evidence was obtained without warrants. Mrs. Holloway's recording of Marcus threatening her? That might not be admissible because Oregon is a 2-party consent state. The documents she took, depending on how she obtained them, they could be considered stolen. Vanessa's face fell. So he gets away with it? After everything? I didn't say that, Rivera said gently. What I'm saying is, we need to build this case carefully. We have enough to open an official investigation, to get warrants, to start applying pressure. But Marcus Holloway is wealthy, connected, and smart. If we move too fast, he'll lawyer up and tie this in knots for years. We need to be methodical. How long will that take? Vanessa asked, her voice breaking. Because every day he's free is a day I'm looking over my shoulder, wondering if he'll finish what he started. We're going to bring him in for questioning tomorrow, Rivera said. Today, we file for warrants to search his home, his computers, his financial records. We move fast but carefully. With what you've given us, plus our own investigation, I'm confident we can build a case that will stick. He looked at both of us seriously. But I need you both to understand something. When we bring Marcus in, when word gets out that his wife is alive and cooperating with federal investigators, he's going to panic. Panicked people do desperate things. I'm recommending protective custody for both of you, at least for the next 72 hours while we secure the immediate evidence. You think he'd really try something? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I think Marcus Holloway has already killed at least once, faked a death and committed fraud to the tune of millions of dollars, Agent Patel said bluntly. People like that don't go quietly. They don't accept consequences. They fight back with everything they have. Vanessa and I looked at each other. Protective custody meant safe houses, agents watching us, our lives completely disrupted, but the alternative was going home and hoping Marcus didn't decide we were loose ends that needed tying up. I'll do it, Vanessa said. Whatever it takes to make sure he can't hurt anyone else. Me too, I agreed. Rivera nodded. Good. We'll get you set up tonight. In the meantime, we need detailed statements from both of you. Everything you remember, everything you've observed, every conversation. This is going to be a long afternoon. He wasn't kidding. For the next 4 hours, we talked. Vanessa went through her entire marriage, the abuse, the threats, the night she ran. She handed over thumb drives, documents, recordings. I corroborated what I could, that Vanessa had appeared at Marcus's door, that I'd seen his reaction, that he'd been building a narrative about her being mentally ill, that he'd threatened me that morning. Agents came and went, making calls, filing paperwork, building the case. By the time we finished, it was nearly 7 at night. Rivera assured us that warrants were being processed, and Marcus would be brought in first thing in the morning. For tonight, we're taking you both to a hotel, he said. Nothing fancy but safe. Agents will be posted outside your rooms. Don't contact anyone, don't go anywhere alone, don't post on social media. As far as anyone knows, you both left town. As we were being escorted out, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You made a mistake, Sarah. Both of you did, but especially you, because at least Vanessa knew what I was capable of. You had no idea what you were getting involved in. That's going to haunt you. My hands started shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I showed it to Agent Rivera. His jaw tightened. That's a direct threat. This actually helps our case, but it also confirms what we suspected. Marcus knows what's happening and he's not going quietly. He looked at both of us. No more phones. We're going dark until tomorrow. I'm sorry, but it's the safest option. We surrendered our phones and were driven to a nondescript hotel near the airport. 2 rooms, connecting door, agents in the hallway. Vanessa and I sat in my room, both too wired to sleep despite the exhaustion. Do you regret helping me? She asked quietly. I thought about it, about my peaceful life before yesterday, about the neighbor I'd pitied and helped. I thought about Marcus's text, about the threat it carried, and I thought about David Chen, about the empty casket at Vanessa's funeral, about all the lies and manipulation. No, I said finally. I regret not seeing through him sooner. I regret that it took you showing up for me to question anything but helping you. No, that's the first thing I've done in a long time that feels truly right. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. When I came back, I expected to fight this alone. Having you believe me, stand with me. It's more than I hoped for. We talked into the night. 2 women who'd been neighbors to the same monster, connected now by truth and testimony. Eventually, exhaustion won and we both dozed off. I was awakened at 6 a.m. by Agent Patel knocking on the door. We're executing the search warrants in 30 minutes, she said, and bringing Marcus in for questioning at 8. I thought you'd want to know. Vanessa and I looked at each other. This was it, the beginning of the end, or maybe the beginning of something worse. Because as Agent Rivera had said, people like Marcus didn't go quietly. And we were about to find out just how desperate he could become when his carefully constructed world finally collapsed around him. The FBI's interrogation room was exactly like you see on TV. Bare walls, metal table, uncomfortable chairs, and a mirror that was obviously one-way glass. Vanessa and I sat in an adjacent observation room with Agents Rivera and Patel, watching Marcus being led in by 2 agents. He was in handcuffs, dressed in the same clothes he'd been wearing yesterday, and he looked exhausted. But there was something else in his expression that made my blood run cold. Calculation. Even now, even caught, he was thinking, planning, looking for angles. We executed search warrants on his home, car, and office at 6 a.m., Rivera explained as we watched. Found 3 computers, multiple hard drives, and a safe in his basement that he claimed didn't exist. We're cracking it now. What was in the computers? Vanessa asked. Encrypted files. But our tech team is good. They'll break the encryption, and I'm willing to bet we'll find exactly what you said we'd find. Evidence of fraud, communications about David Chen, financial records of the shell corporations. Patel added, we also found something interesting in his bedroom. a burner phone hidden inside a hollowed-out book. He'd been making calls to a number in Mexico, frequent calls over the past 3 years. Vanessa tensed beside me. He was tracking me. He knew I'd run south, knew I'd probably end up near the border. He's been monitoring, waiting. That's our theory, Rivera agreed. The question is whether he was just watching or planning something more active. On the other side of the glass, the interrogating agents entered. Lead was Agent Marcus Foster, a man in his 40s with an intensity that filled the room even through the observation glass. Mr. Holloway, Foster began, taking a seat across from Marcus. I'm Agent Foster. You've been read your rights, you've declined a lawyer for now, and you've agreed to talk with us. Is that correct? That's correct, Marcus said, his voice calm. Too calm, because I have nothing to hide. This is all a misunderstanding based on the delusions of a mentally ill woman. We'll get to Vanessa Holloway in a moment. First, I want to talk about Techdyne Solutions and your former business partner, David Chen. Something flickered across Marcus's face, gone in an instant. What about David? When did you last see him? 4 years ago, maybe? He left the company, went off to find himself or whatever. We'd grown apart, wanted different things for the business. Interesting, Foster said, pulling out a folder. Because we have emails from your personal account, sent 2 weeks before David's disappearance, where you discuss the David problem and how it needs to be solved permanently. Those emails were taken out of context, Marcus said smoothly. The David problem was a business issue. He wanted to take the company in a direction I thought was financially unsound. By solved permanently, I meant buying out his shares. Did you buy out his shares? No, because he left before we could finalize anything. Foster pulled out another document. We also have financial records showing that you created 3 shell corporations in the month before David disappeared. These corporations received transfers totaling $8 million from Techdyne's accounts. That's not illegal. They were subsidiaries, perfectly legitimate business structures, except they weren't listed on any of Techdyne's official paperwork. They weren't disclosed to investors or to David Chen, who owned 40% of the company. That's fraud, Mr. Holloway. Marcus's jaw tightened. I want a lawyer. Of course. But before your lawyer gets here, let me ask you one more question. Where is David Chen? I have no idea. Like I said, he left. Check his emails, his bank accounts. He emptied everything and vanished. We did check, Foster said. Those emails? Sent from an IP address that traces back to your home. The bank transfers? Made from a laptop we just seized from your house from an account that David Chen never had access to according to his bank's logs. Marcus said nothing, but I could see a vein pulsing in his temple. And then there's the matter of your wife, Foster continued, who you reported dead 3 years ago, except she's very much alive and sitting in this building right now. That woman is not my wife, Marcus said flatly. My wife died. That woman is someone who became obsessed with me after reading about Vanessa's death. It's a psychological phenomenon, it happens. She's stolen my wife's identity. Really? Because we ran her fingerprints, Mr. Holloway. They match Vanessa Holloway's driver's license, her nursing license, every official record we have, unless you're suggesting she somehow stole those years ago before your wife died. Marcus's expression was crumbling now, the mask of calm superiority cracking. I want my lawyer, now. I'm not answering any more questions. Fair enough, Foster said, standing. But I should tell you, we're charging you with fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. As we continue our investigation into David Chen's disappearance, additional charges may follow. And Mr. Holloway, your wife is cooperating fully. She's giving us everything. Every document, every recording, every detail of your marriage and your business dealings. Whatever you think you can hide, whatever you think your lawyer can explain away, you should know that the person who knew you best is telling us everything. As Foster left the room, Marcus sat alone at the table. For a moment his face was completely blank. Then slowly he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who'd just made a decision, and it made every hair on my body stand on end. Something's wrong, I said. Rivera frowned. What do you mean? That smile. He's not broken, he's not panicking, he looks like he's won something. Patel was already on her radio. Get a unit to the hotel where we had them last night, and I want eyes on every known associate of Holloway's now. But I knew, with a certainty that felt like ice in my veins, that we were missing something. Marcus had 3 years to plan for this contingency, 3 years to build fail-safes and backup plans, and that smile said he was about to spring one of them. Agent Rivera's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his face went pale. "When?" he demanded. "How long ago?" He hung up and looked at us. "The safe we found in Marcus's basement." It finally opened. Inside was cash, fake passports, and a laptop that was wirelessly transmitting data. The moment we opened the safe, it sent an automated signal. "Transmitting what?" Vanessa asked, though her voice said she already knew the answer. "Your location. Both of your locations, actually. Marcus had your phones cloned somehow, probably when he hacked your emails years ago. Even though you turned them off and we took them, the data had already been captured and was sitting in that safe, waiting to be triggered if law enforcement ever got too close." "That's impossible," Vanessa whispered. "I got a new phone, new number, everything." "Your email account," I said suddenly. "Did you keep accessing the same email?" Her face confirmed it. She'd kept one account active to maintain some connection to her old life, and Marcus had been monitoring it, tracking every login, every location. "We need to move you both right now," Patel said, already heading for the door. If that signal went out, the lights went out. Not just in our room, but throughout the building. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. "That's not a coincidence," Rivera said, pulling his weapon. "Get them to the secure floor. Now." Patel grabbed my arm and another agent grabbed Vanessa. We were rushing down a hallway when we heard it. An explosion, distant but powerful enough to shake the building. "South entrance," someone shouted over the radio. "Vehicle bomb, building's compromised." Panic erupted. Agents were running, shouting, coordinating evacuation. In the chaos, I lost sight of Vanessa. "Where is she?" I screamed over the noise. "Where's Vanessa?" Agent Patel's face was grim. "We got separated, but we need to get you out first, then we'll find her." "No, I'm not leaving without her." But Patel was stronger than she looked, and she was pulling me toward a stairwell. We burst through the door and started descending. Behind us, I could hear more shouting, the sound of gunfire. "Was that Marcus?" I asked as we raced down the stairs. "Did he do this?" "Probably not directly, but he made calls to Mexico, remember? We're thinking cartel connections, hired mercenaries. He's had years to build contingencies." We reached the ground floor and exited into an underground parking garage. FBI vehicles were everywhere, agents loading people into cars, the whole operation descending into controlled chaos. Agent Rivera appeared, supporting Vanessa. She was limping, bleeding from a cut on her forehead, but alive. "She got caught in a stampede," Rivera explained. "But she's okay." Vanessa and I grabbed each other, and I'd never been so relieved to see someone. "They're trying to kill us," she said unnecessarily. "Marcus had a plan for this." "We're getting you both out of the city," Rivera said. "Federal safe house, location classified. You'll be there until we can secure Marcus and neutralize whatever threat he's activated." We were loaded into an SUV with tinted windows, surrounded by other FBI vehicles. As we pulled out of the garage, I looked back at the building. Smoke was billowing from one side, fire trucks were arriving, and I could see agents setting up a perimeter. Marcus had done all this from inside an interrogation room. One smile, one triggered signal, and he'd brought chaos to a federal building. "How did he do it?" I asked. "How did he set all this up?" "People like Marcus always have escape plans," Rivera said from the front seat. "They always have someone they can pay or blackmail to do their dirty work. The question is how deep this goes and who else is involved." We drove for 2 hours, changing vehicles twice, taking random turns until I had no idea where we were. Finally, we pulled up to a nondescript house in what looked like suburban Seattle. "You'll stay here," Agent Patel explained as she led us inside. "Full security team, surveillance, everything you need. Don't leave, don't contact anyone, don't even go near the windows." The house was comfortable but sterile, the kind of place that existed only to hide people. Vanessa and I were given separate bedrooms, but spent most of the time in the living room together, watching news reports about the bombing, waiting for updates. "I'm sorry," Vanessa said for the 100th time. "I brought you into this if I'd known he'd go this far." "Stop," I interrupted. "Marcus went this far because he's a monster who was finally getting caught. This isn't on you." But privately, I wondered if we'd ever be safe again. Marcus was in custody, but he'd proven he could reach outside those walls. He had resources, connections, plans within plans. 3 days passed. The news cycle moved on, calling the FBI building incident a suspected terror attack with no confirmed perpetrator. Agent Rivera called twice a day with updates. They'd arrested 5 men connected to the bombing, all hired mercenaries with cartel ties. Marcus's encrypted files had been cracked, revealing everything Vanessa said and more. The evidence was overwhelming. We're building toward indictment, Rivera told us on day 4. Multiple counts: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder in David Chen's case, attempted murder for the bombing. He's going away for life, possibly multiple life sentences. When can we leave here? Vanessa asked. When we're certain there are no other threats. Maybe a week, maybe 2. But on day 5, something changed. I was reading in the living room when Agent Patel burst in, her face ashen. Turn on the news, now. I grabbed the remote, flipped to a news channel, and felt my stomach drop. Escaped from federal custody this morning. Marcus Holloway, who was being held on multiple charges including fraud and conspiracy to commit murder, overpowered a guard during a transfer and fled. Authorities are conducting a massive manhunt. Holloway is considered armed and extremely dangerous. If you see him, do not approach. Call 911 immediately. The screen showed Marcus's photo, and I swear, even through the television, I could feel his cold smile reaching for me. How? Vanessa whispered. How did he escape? Patel was on her phone listening, her expression growing darker. They're saying a guard was bribed. Door locks mysteriously malfunctioned. A vehicle was waiting outside. It was planned, coordinated. Rivera appeared in the doorway. We're moving you again now. If Marcus has the resources to escape custody, he has the resources to find this location. Where will we go? I asked, but I already knew the answer from his face. We don't know yet. Somewhere Marcus won't think to look. Somewhere off the grid. He paused. I need you both to understand something. This has become a manhunt. Every law enforcement agency in the country is looking for Marcus Holloway. We will find him. But until we do, we're not safe anywhere, Vanessa finished. That's what you're saying. As long as he's out there, we'll never be safe. Rivera didn't contradict her. Within an hour, we were packed and moving again. As we drove away from the safe house, I looked at Vanessa in the seat next to me. She'd come back to expose Marcus, to make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. But instead, she'd triggered a war. And now we were both running from a man who'd proven he would burn the world down rather than face consequences for his crimes. Where do you think he is? I asked quietly. Vanessa looked out the window at the passing landscape. Close. Marcus always liked to stay close to his targets. He'll be watching, waiting for us to make a mistake or for the protection to slip for just a moment. That's when he'll strike. What do? We survive, she said simply. We survive and we wait for him to make a mistake. Because eventually, everyone does. Even Marcus. But as we drove into an uncertain future, chased by a ghost who'd once been my neighbor, I wondered if survival would be enough. And I wondered what would be left of our lives when this was finally over. The second safe house was in rural Montana, so isolated that the nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. It was a cabin, rustic but fortified, with security cameras covering every angle and an FBI security team that rotated in 12-hour shifts. Vanessa and I had been there for a week, and the isolation was starting to wear on both of us. They'll find him soon, I said one morning over coffee, though I was less certain each day. The news channels had stopped covering the manhunt. Marcus had vanished like smoke, and with each passing day, it felt more like he was winning. Maybe, Vanessa said. She'd aged in the past 2 weeks. New lines around her eyes, a heaviness in her shoulders that hadn't been there before. Or maybe he's gone, off to some country with no extradition treaty, living on the money he stole. Maybe we'll spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders for nothing. You don't believe that? No, she admitted. I know Marcus. He doesn't run away from problems, he eliminates them. We're the only real threats to him. As long as we're alive to testify, as long as we can identify him, he'll never be truly free. She looked at me. He's out there, Sarah, and he's coming. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Marcus, about his smile in the interrogation room, about the way he'd looked at me on his porch when I refused to be intimidated. Around 2 a.m., I gave up and went to the kitchen for water. The cabin was dark except for the security monitors in the corner, their blue glow casting strange shadows. One of the FBI agents, a woman named Chen, no relation, she'd assured me, was on watch. Can't sleep? She asked. Bad dreams, I said, which was close enough to the truth. I poured water from the tap, looked out the window at the vast darkness of Montana wilderness. The moon was nearly full, casting everything in silver. And that's when I saw him. Just for a second at the edge of the tree line, a figure watching the cabin. I dropped my glass. It shattered on the floor, water and glass everywhere. What's wrong? Chen was on her feet, hand on her weapon. There's someone out there, I pointed with a shaking hand. At the tree line, I saw someone watching. Chen hit an alarm, and suddenly the whole cabin was awake. Lights flooded the property, agents rushing to windows with weapons drawn. "I don't see anyone," one of them said. "Could have been an animal," another suggested. "Elk maybe, or a bear." But Chen was looking at the security footage, rewinding. "There," she said, freezing the frame. And there he was, Marcus, just barely visible in the trees, looking directly at the camera, looking directly at me. How did he find us? Vanessa had appeared, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes wide with fear. How did he even know where to look? "I don't know," Chen said, already on her radio. "But he's here and we need immediate backup and extraction. This location is compromised." The response came back crackly. "Backup is 2 hours out. Weather's turned, helicopter can't fly. Ground units are en route, but they're coming from Missoula." 2 hours. We had to hold out for 2 hours. "Secure the building," the team leader, Agent Morrison, ordered. "Windows locked, doors reinforced. We create a perimeter and wait for backup. He's one man, we're 6 trained agents. We can handle this." But Marcus wasn't just one man. He'd proven that time and again. He had resources, planning, and the kind of cold calculation that came from months of preparation. The next 30 minutes were tense silence. Agents positioned at every window and door, weapons ready, eyes scanning the darkness. The floodlights illuminated the immediate area around the cabin, but beyond that ring of light, the forest was an impenetrable black. "Movement north side," an agent called out. Everyone shifted, weapons trained on that sector, but there was nothing, just trees swaying in the wind. "False alarm," Morrison said, but his voice was tight. Then the power went out. The floodlights died. The security monitors went black, and we were plunged into darkness so complete I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. "Generator should kick in," Chen said, and I heard the nervousness in her voice. But seconds passed, then a minute, and nothing happened. "He cut the generator," Morrison said. "Night vision, everyone, switch to thermal." The agents pulled out equipment, and I heard the electronic hum of devices powering on. Vanessa grabbed my hand in the darkness, and I could feel her trembling. Or maybe I was the one trembling. "I've got a heat signature," an agent said. 200 yards out, moving closer. "No, wait. 3 signatures. 4. How many?" "It's a distraction," Morrison cut in. "He's setting up decoys, heating elements or something to confuse our thermal. Stay focused on the cabin perimeter, not what's happening in the woods." A sound made us all freeze. The creak of wood, like someone stepping on the porch. "South entrance," Chen whispered. Everyone turned. In the green glow of night vision, I could see Morrison creeping toward the door, weapon raised. He peered through the peephole, then relaxed slightly. Nothing, just the wind. The window behind him exploded inward. Glass sprayed everywhere, and something small and cylindrical bounced across the floor. "Grenade!" someone shouted, and there was a scramble for cover. But it wasn't a grenade. It was a flashbang. The explosion of light and sound in the confined space was overwhelming. I couldn't see, couldn't hear, could barely think. My ears rang so loudly it felt like my head would split open. Through the disorientation, I felt hands grabbing me, strong hands pulling me toward the door. I tried to fight, tried to scream, but I couldn't hear my own voice. Someone was dragging me outside, into the cold Montana night. My vision started to clear, just enough to see who had me. Marcus. He was wearing tactical gear, night vision goggles pushed up on his head, and he had a gun pressed against my ribs. "Don't make a sound," he said directly into my ear, his breath hot against my skin. "Or I shoot you and go back for Vanessa. Your choice." I went limp, stopped fighting. He pulled me toward the tree line, moving fast and confident like he'd walked this path 100 times. Behind us I could hear shouting as the FBI agents recovered from the flashbang. "Chen, call it in. He's got Sarah. All units, suspect has taken a hostage, heading north into the woods." But the darkness swallowed their voices. Marcus moved like a ghost through the forest, pulling me along. I stumbled on roots and rocks, but his grip never faltered. After what felt like miles but was probably only a few hundred yards, we reached a small clearing where a dirt bike was hidden under camouflage netting. "Get on," Marcus ordered, shoving me toward it. "I don't know how to. I'm driving. You're just holding on. Unless you want me to shoot you and leave you for the bears." I climbed onto the bike behind him, and he zip-tied my wrists together in front of me, then looped them over his shoulders so I couldn't jump off without choking him. Smart. Cruel, but smart. The bike roared to life, and we shot through the forest on a trail I couldn't see. Branches whipped at my face, and I had to bury my head against Marcus's back to avoid being blinded. We rode for maybe 20 minutes before emerging onto a dirt road where a truck was waiting. Marcus cut the zip ties, shoved me into the passenger seat, and zip-tied me again to the door handle. Then we were driving, heading deeper into nowhere. "Where are you taking me?" I finally asked when I could trust my voice not to shake. "Somewhere we can talk without interruption," Marcus said calmly, like we were going for coffee instead of him kidnapping me at gunpoint. "You and I need to have a conversation about choices and consequences. The FBI will find you. They'll find us. Maybe. Eventually. But by then it won't matter." He glanced at me, and in the dashboard lights his face looked almost kind, almost like the neighbor I'd known. "I want you to understand something, Sarah. I don't hate you. I actually liked you. You were a good neighbor, quiet, minded your own business. We could have gone on being friendly neighbors forever if you hadn't let Vanessa poison you." "She didn't poison me, she told me the truth. Her truth, which is a very different thing from the actual truth." Marcus turned onto a highway, heading north. "Do you want to know what really happened? The whole story, not just Vanessa's version? I don't think you're capable of telling the truth." He laughed, genuinely amused. "Fair enough. I've lied about a lot of things, but I've never lied about the important stuff, Sarah. I really did love Vanessa. That part was true. Everything went wrong because of her, not me. You threatened to kill her. I told her what would happen if she betrayed me. There's a difference. I gave her a choice. Stay, work through our problems like married couples do, or leave and face consequences. She chose to run, chose to steal my documents, chose to become an enemy instead of a partner. The casual way he rationalized it made my skin crawl. You faked her death. I adapted to circumstances. When she disappeared, people were going to ask questions. I controlled the narrative, gave everyone closure, and moved on with my life. It was actually a kindness to her family. They got to grieve and heal instead of spending years wondering where she was. And David Chen? Was killing him a kindness too?" Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. David was a necessary correction. He was going to destroy everything we'd built over a moral disagreement about business practices. Sometimes you have to make hard choices to protect what you've created. You're insane. I'm pragmatic. There's a difference. He took an exit, driving into a town so small it was barely more than a gas station and a diner. He pulled into a parking lot behind an abandoned building. "This is where we get out. Don't try to run. I'm faster than you, and I really don't want to have to hurt you." He cut my zip ties and led me inside the building. It looked like it had once been a small warehouse, now empty except for dust and a couple of folding chairs. Marcus had clearly prepared this space. There was food, water, a camping stove, and a bedroll in the corner. "Sit," he said, gesturing to one of the chairs. When I hesitated, he pointed the gun at me. I said, "Sit." I sat. Marcus took the other chair, keeping the gun trained on me but looking more tired than threatening now. In the fluorescent light from the camping lantern he switched on, I could see he'd aged too. The past 2 weeks had been hard on him. "Here's the situation," he said. "The FBI has my assets frozen, my accounts monitored, my life as Marcus Holloway completely dismantled. But I'm not an idiot. I have contingency plans, money hidden in places they'll never find, documents that could bring down people much more powerful than me if they ever came to light. So why not use them? Why not just disappear? Because there's one thing standing in my way. Testimony. Specifically, yours and Vanessa's. As long as you two can testify about what you've seen, what you know, I can never be truly free. Evidence can be explained away, documents can be challenged, but eyewitnesses are compelling. My blood went cold. You're going to kill us. I'm considering my options." Marcus set the gun on his lap, still within easy reach but not directly pointed at me anymore. "Option 1. I kill both of you and disappear. Clean, simple, effective. But it also makes me a murderer beyond any doubt. Adds to the charges if I'm ever caught. You already killed David Chen. Allegedly. They have circumstantial evidence, suspicious patterns, but no body. With you and Vanessa, there would be bodies. That changes things." He leaned forward. "Option 2. I convince you that cooperating with me is in your best interests. You recant your testimony, say Vanessa manipulated you, that you were confused about what you saw. Vanessa backs off, goes back into hiding, and everyone moves on. That will never happen, won't it? Because right now, Sarah, your life is in my hands, and more importantly, so is Vanessa's. I know she's still at that cabin, surrounded by FBI agents who failed to stop me once already. What makes you think they can stop me from getting to her? He was right, and the realization made me feel sick. If Marcus could grab me from a secured location, he could get to Vanessa too. What do you want from me? I asked. An agreement. You tell the FBI you were mistaken, that in the chaos and confusion you misidentified things. You say Vanessa seems genuine, but you can't corroborate her specific claims. You create reasonable doubt. In exchange, I disappear and leave both of you alone. They'll never believe me. They'll be skeptical, sure, but you're a civilian, traumatized by recent events. It's plausible you'd want to back away from this whole situation. And the thing about reasonable doubt is you don't need to convince everyone. You just need to convince enough people that the case isn't as solid as they thought. I thought about Vanessa, about everything she'd been through, everything she'd risked to come back and tell the truth. If I backed down now, it would all be for nothing. But I also thought about Marcus's gun, about how easily he'd gotten to me, about the fact that he was clearly desperate enough to do anything. And if I refuse? I asked. Marcus picked up the gun again. Then we go with option 1, and I'm very, very sorry it came to this. We sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, I could hear the wind picking up, the sound of approaching thunder. A storm was coming. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course, you have until morning. When the sun comes up, you decide, cooperation or consequences. He tied my hands again, gentler this time, and secured me to a support beam. Then he settled into the corner with his gun and closed his eyes. Don't try anything stupid, he said without opening them. I'm a light sleeper, and I really don't want to hurt you. As Marcus's breathing evened out into something that might have been sleep, I tested my bonds. The zip tie was tight but not cutting off circulation. The beam was solid, no way to break free. I was trapped, and in a few hours, I'd have to make an impossible choice. Through a broken window, I could see the first flashes of lightning on the horizon. The storm was getting closer, and I had the feeling that whatever happened next would change everything. Because there was a third option Marcus hadn't considered, one that required more courage than I knew I had. Refuse to cooperate, call his bluff, and trust that the truth would win out in the end. But was I willing to bet my life and Vanessa's on that trust? As the thunder rolled closer and Marcus slept with a gun in his lap, I realized that the answer to that question would define what kind of person I really was. And by morning, I'd have to decide. I didn't sleep. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus's cold calculation, heard his casual discussion of murder as if it were just another business decision. The storm rolled in around 3 a.m., rain pounding on the warehouse roof, lightning turning the world outside into brief, brilliant snapshots. Marcus woke with the thunder, immediately alert, gun in hand before his eyes were fully open. That was when I knew. He'd been in situations like this before. Normal people don't wake up armed and ready. Still here, I see, he said, almost amused, as if I had a choice. He stood, stretched, walked to the window to look at the storm. For just a moment his back was to me and I thought about trying something. But what? I was tied to a beam, he had a gun, and we were in the middle of nowhere. Beautiful, isn't it? Marcus said, watching the lightning. The raw power of nature. People think they're in control, but we're always just one storm away from chaos. Is that how you justify what you've done? That it's just nature? Survival of the fittest? He turned to look at me. I don't justify anything. I made choices that seemed right at the time. Some worked out, some didn't. That's life. David Chen didn't get a life. Marcus's expression hardened. David made his choice when he threatened to destroy everything I'd built. You want to know what really happened? Fine. I'll tell you because it doesn't matter anymore. The FBI knows most of it anyway. He sat back down, the gun resting on his knee. David discovered I was moving money, yes. But what Vanessa didn't know, what the FBI hasn't figured out, is that I was moving it to protect it. Our company was about to be sued by the government for false claims about our software. David knew it too. The difference was, he wanted to come clean, take our lumps, possibly go to prison. I wanted to salvage what we could and start over. So you killed him. I didn't plan to. We met to talk it through, at a cabin he owned in the mountains. We argued. It got physical. He hit his head on a fireplace mantle, went down hard. Marcus's voice was flat, factual. I checked for a pulse. He was dead. Accident, really. But who would believe that? So I made it look like he'd left town, sent some emails, made some transfers, sold his car, created a trail that suggested he'd run away. You could have called the police, told them it was an accident. And risk everything on the belief that they'd see it my way? No. I'd worked too hard, built too much. David's death was unfortunate, but not worth destroying my life over. The casual way he said it made me want to scream. And Vanessa? Was terrorizing her also about protecting what you'd built? Vanessa was complicated. I did love her, in my way, but she became a liability. She saw things, knew things, and I could tell she was planning to leave. In a different situation, I might have let her go. But with the David situation, with the FBI starting to sniff around the company, I couldn't risk her talking to anyone. He stood, began pacing. The night I threatened her, I wasn't planning to kill her. I was trying to scare her into staying quiet. But she ran anyway, and then I had two problems. A missing wife and an investigation. Faking her death solved both. It gave her a reason to stay hidden and gave me sympathy that deflected suspicion. Except she came back, Marcus agreed. Which brings us to now. And to your decision, Sarah. It's almost dawn. Time to choose. Through the window, I could see the sky lightening, the storm moving past. My last hours of reprieve were ending. Before I answer, I said, I need to know something. If I agree to help you, what guarantee do I have that you'll actually leave us alone? That this doesn't just buy you time to find a better moment to eliminate us? Fair question. The answer is, you don't have a guarantee. You have my word, which I know means nothing to you now, and you have logic. If you recant and Vanessa backs down, I get what I need without the risk of killing two people. That's my preferred outcome. Clean, simple, everyone lives. But if I refuse, then you're choosing option one, and I really am sorry about that. He checked his gun, ensured it was loaded. The gesture was casual, practiced. I won't enjoy it, Sarah. I genuinely liked you, but I've come too far. Sacrificed too much to let it all fall apart now. My mouth was dry, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to agree, to say whatever he wanted, to survive. But I thought about Vanessa, about the 3 years she'd spent in hiding, about David Chen who'd never gotten justice. I thought about the person I wanted to be versus the person fear was trying to make me. I can't do it, I said, and my voice only shook a little. I can't lie for you. I can't help you escape consequences for what you've done. Whatever happens to me, I can't do that. Marcus stared at me for a long moment. I couldn't read his expression. Disappointment? Anger? Respect? You're sure? Because there's no coming back from this choice. I'm sure. He raised the gun, pointed it at my chest. His hand was steady. I really am sorry, Sarah. You seem like a good person. The world needs good people. His finger moved to the trigger and I closed my eyes. I didn't want to see it coming. The sound of the gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space, but I didn't feel anything. No pain, no impact. I opened my eyes in confusion. Marcus was staring at his shoulder where blood was blooming across his shirt. He'd been shot, but not by his own gun. The warehouse door burst open, and FBI agents poured in, weapons drawn. Drop it, drop the weapon now! Marcus looked at the gun in his hand, at the agents, at me. For just a second, I saw real emotion cross his face. Defeat. Then it was gone, replaced by that same cold calculation. You were tracking her, he said. Not a question. He dropped the gun and raised his hands. GPS tracker sewn into your jacket lining, Agent Rivera said, stepping through the door. We activated it when he took you. Had to wait for the right moment to move in without him shooting you first. They swarmed Marcus, cuffing him, reading his rights. He didn't resist, didn't speak. As they led him past me, he looked down, and his eyes were completely empty. The Marcus I'd known, neighbor and monster, was gone. What remained was just a shell, a man who'd played every angle and finally lost. Agent Chen cut my zip ties, helped me stand. My legs were shaking so badly I nearly fell. Vanessa, I managed to ask. Safe. We have her secure. She's been going out of her mind worrying about you. They wrapped me in a blanket, led me outside to where ambulances and FBI vehicles were waiting. The sun was rising over Montana, painting the sky in oranges and golds. It was beautiful. I was alive to see it. In the ambulance, as a paramedic checked me over, Rivera sat beside me. That was incredibly brave, he said. Or incredibly stupid. I'm not sure which. Probably both, I admitted. But I couldn't let him win. Not after everything. He's not winning anything now. Between the kidnapping, the assault on the FBI facility, everything we found in his files, and now assault with a deadly weapon on you, Marcus Holloway is going away forever. Multiple life sentences, no possibility of parole. Good, I said, and I meant it. They took me to a hospital in Missoula, kept me for observation. Vanessa arrived that evening, escorted by agents. When she saw me, she burst into tears and we held each other, two survivors of the same monster. I'm so sorry, she kept saying. I never should have dragged you into this. Stop. You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose to help, and I'd choose it again. We talked for hours about everything that had happened, about what came next. The FBI would need our testimony at trial, but Rivera assured us the case was airtight. Marcus would spend the rest of his life in prison. What will you do after? I asked Vanessa. I don't know. I'm legally alive again, which is weird to say. I can go back to nursing maybe. Try to rebuild some kind of life. What about you? Honestly, I have no idea. But I know I can't go back to that house on Maple Street. Too many memories, too much darkness. I need a fresh start somewhere new. We could start fresh together, Vanessa suggested. New city, new lives, but with someone who understands. Someone who knows the whole truth. I thought about it. Leaving Portland, starting over, having a friend who knew every dark corner of this story. It sounded good. It sounded like healing. I'd like that, I said. 3 weeks later, Marcus Holloway was formally indicted on 23 counts ranging from fraud to attempted murder. The trial would take months, maybe years, but the outcome wasn't in doubt. We'd won, but winning didn't feel the way I'd expected. I thought there would be triumph, satisfaction, maybe even joy. Instead, there was just exhaustion and the slow, painful process of learning to feel safe again. Vanessa and I moved to Seattle, shared an apartment in a building with good security and friendly neighbors. We both started therapy, dealing with trauma in our own ways. She went back to nursing part-time. I kept doing graphic design but started taking on different kinds of clients, nonprofits working with domestic violence survivors, turning our experience into something meaningful. 6 months after Marcus's arrest on a rainy Seattle afternoon, Vanessa and I sat in a coffee shop watching people pass by on the street. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Coming forward, helping me? Your life would be so different if you just stayed out of it. I thought about the person I'd been before that October day when Vanessa appeared at Marcus's door. Comfortable, safe, willfully blind to the darkness living next door. No, I said honestly. That version of my life was built on ignorance. This version, as hard as it's been, is built on truth. I'll take truth over comfortable lies any day. Vanessa smiled, and it was the first completely genuine, unguarded smile I'd seen from her. Me too. We clinked our coffee cups together, a toast to survival, to truth, to the long road of healing still ahead. The Marcus Holloway we'd known was gone, locked away where he couldn't hurt anyone else. But the scars he'd left would take time to fade. Outside, the rain continued, washing the streets clean. And inside, two women who'd faced a monster and lived sat together, building something new from the wreckage. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And that was enough. The trial began in January, nearly a year after Vanessa had knocked on Marcus's door and shattered the illusion of his carefully constructed life. The Portland courthouse was packed with media, curious onlookers, and the families of victims seeking justice. David Chen's parents sat in the front row, elderly and heartbroken, finally learning the truth about their son's disappearance. Vanessa and I were the prosecution's star witnesses. Over 3 days we told our stories. My observations of Marcus as a neighbor, the night Vanessa returned, the documents we'd retrieved, my kidnapping and the hours in that warehouse waiting to die. The defense tried to paint Vanessa as an unreliable narrator, claiming her years in hiding had distorted her memories and perceptions. They suggested I was a drama-seeking busybody who'd inserted myself into a situation I didn't understand. But the evidence was overwhelming. The FBI had cracked Marcus's encrypted files, finding detailed records of his embezzlement, communications about the David problem, and even a journal where he'd meticulously documented his manipulation of Vanessa during their marriage. The forensic accountants traced millions of dollars through shell corporations. Most damning of all were Marcus's own words. The recording Vanessa had made of him threatening her life, recovered from the storage unit and authenticated by multiple experts. When it played in the courtroom, you could hear the collective gasp. Marcus's voice, calm and methodical, describing exactly how he'd make her death look accidental, how no one would ever suspect him. On the stand, I watched Marcus throughout my testimony. He sat perfectly still, showing no emotion, no reaction. It was as if he'd shut down completely, retreated to somewhere deep inside where the verdict couldn't touch him. But when Vanessa took the stand, something changed. As she described their marriage, The escalating abuse, the terror of living with someone who controlled every aspect of her life. Marcus's mask cracked. His jaw clenched. His hands gripped the table. And for just a moment, I saw rage flash across his face. The Marcus who'd wanted us to believe he was the victim, the misunderstood husband of a mentally ill woman, that Marcus was gone. What remained was the truth. A man who'd built his life on lies, manipulation, and violence, and who couldn't stand hearing it all exposed in a public courtroom. Mr. Holloway, the prosecutor said during her closing arguments, is not a tragic figure. He's not a victim of circumstances or a man driven to desperate acts by forces beyond his control. He is a predator who carefully selected his victims, meticulously planned his crimes, and showed no remorse even when caught. David Chen is dead because he stood in Marcus Holloway's way. Vanessa Holloway spent 3 years in hiding, legally dead, because she dared to want freedom. And Sarah Chen nearly died because she chose truth over complicity. She gestured to the evidence laid out on tables. Documents, recordings, hard drives containing thousands of incriminating files. The defense would have you believe this is all a misunderstanding, a conspiracy theory woven by a disturbed woman and amplified by an overeager neighbor. But ladies and gentlemen of the jury, evidence doesn't lie. Numbers don't conspire. And Marcus Holloway's own words, recorded and authenticated, tell us exactly who he is. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. David Chen's mother wept. Reporters rushed out to file their stories. And Vanessa grabbed my hand so tightly I thought my fingers might break. Marcus showed no reaction. He simply stood when the judge ordered him to, listened to the litany of life sentences being imposed, and was led away in shackles. He didn't look at Vanessa or me as he passed. We'd ceased to exist for him, just like David Chen, just like everyone else who'd become inconvenient. After the verdict, there was a press conference. We debated whether to attend, whether to make ourselves public figures in this story, but ultimately decided we owed it to other survivors to speak. "I'm standing here today," Vanessa said into the microphones, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face, "because I found the courage to come back and tell the truth, because Sarah Chen believed me when she had no reason to, and because the FBI and prosecutors took my testimony seriously instead of dismissing me as a crazy woman making wild accusations." She paused, gathering herself. "To anyone out there living with abuse, living with someone who controls and terrorizes you, you're not crazy, you're not imagining it, and there are people who will believe you, who will help you. It took me 3 years of hiding and nearly dying to learn that, but I'm here now, and I'm proof that truth can win." I spoke next, saying what I'd learned about the dangers of willful blindness, about the importance of believing survivors, about choosing courage over comfort. The cameras flashed, questions shouted, and through it all, I thought about the person I'd been before all this, someone who'd rather avoid conflict than face hard truths. I couldn't go back to being that person, and I didn't want to. The trial's aftermath brought unexpected changes. Vanessa was approached by domestic violence organizations, asked to speak at events to share her story with other survivors. She started slowly, still healing, but found purpose in helping others recognize the patterns she'd missed in her own marriage. I wrote an article about my experience for a major magazine, which led to more writing opportunities. I became the person telling stories about the hidden darkness in suburban neighborhoods, about the monsters who hide behind normal facades. It wasn't work I'd ever imagined doing, but it felt important, necessary. Marcus was sent to a maximum security federal prison in Colorado. He'd never be eligible for parole. Every year, Vanessa and I received notifications about his status. Still incarcerated, no incidents, a model prisoner. It was surreal to think of him locked away, the man who'd seemed so powerful now reduced to a number in a cell. Sometimes I wondered what he thought about, whether he felt remorse or just anger at being caught. Agent Rivera told me that inmates like Marcus rarely change. They don't see themselves as criminals, he said. They see themselves as victims of bad luck or circumstance. Marcus will probably spend the rest of his life believing he was justified, that he was the real victim here. That was perhaps the saddest part, knowing that even facing a lifetime in prison, Marcus would never truly understand what he'd done wrong. David Chen's parents used the trial's publicity to establish a foundation in their son's name, supporting ethical business practices in tech companies. They asked Vanessa and me to serve on the board, and we agreed. It felt like a way to make meaning from tragedy, To ensure David's death led to something positive. On the 1-year anniversary of Marcus's conviction, Vanessa and I drove to Maple Street. Neither of us had been back since everything happened. The neighborhood looked exactly the same, quiet, tree-lined, safe. Marcus's house had been sold to a young family with 2 kids. I could see toys in the yard, lights in the windows, life going on. "Do you think they know?" Vanessa asked. "About what happened here?" "Probably. It was all over the news. But they're choosing to see the house as just a house, not a crime scene. Maybe that's healthy." We stood there for a few minutes, 2 women staring at a place that had fundamentally changed our lives. The house where Marcus had lived his lie. The place where I'd delivered casseroles to a monster and never known. "Ready to go?" Vanessa asked. "Yeah, I don't need to see this anymore." As we drove away, I felt something lift. We'd spent so much time looking back, processing trauma, understanding what had happened. Maybe it was finally time to look forward. Vanessa must have been thinking the same thing because she said, "I've been considering going back to school, maybe becoming a nurse practitioner specializing in trauma care. What do you think?" "I think that's perfect," I said honestly. "You'd be amazing at it." "What about you? Any grand plans?" I thought about the writing I'd been doing, the stories I'd been telling. I want to write a book about all of this. Not just Marcus and what he did, but about how easy it is to miss the truth when it's hiding in plain sight. About choosing to see reality even when it's terrifying. Will you use our real names? Only if you're okay with it. This is your story as much as mine. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Use them. I'm done hiding. Let people know that Vanessa Holloway survived, that she came back, that she won. I reached over and squeezed her hand. We won. Both of us. That night, I started writing. Not the article, not the testimony, but the full story. From the day Marcus moved in next door to the guilty verdict that had finally brought justice. I wrote about the warning signs I'd missed, the casual cruelty hidden behind friendly smiles, the way predators camouflage themselves in normalcy. I wrote about Vanessa's courage and the price she'd paid for it. I wrote about my own transformation from passive observer to active participant in seeking truth. The book took 8 months to write and another 6 to publish. The Neighbor hit bookstores on a Tuesday in October, 2 years after the day Vanessa had knocked on Marcus's door. It was dedicated to all the survivors who found the courage to speak and to those still finding their voice. The first review came from David Chen's mother. "This book tells the truth about my son's death and honors his memory. More importantly, it may help others recognize danger before it's too late." That would be the best legacy David could have. On publication day, Vanessa and I did a reading at a bookstore in Portland. The room was packed. Survivors of abuse, true crime enthusiasts, people from our old neighborhood who'd known Marcus and couldn't believe the truth. During the Q&A, someone asked the question I'd been expecting. "Do you ever regret getting involved? Would your life be easier if you just looked the other way?" I thought about the person I'd been, comfortable and willfully blind. I thought about the person I'd become, scarred but stronger. My life would definitely be easier, I said honestly, but it wouldn't be better. Living a comfortable lie isn't really living at all. It's just existing. What Vanessa and I went through was terrifying, traumatic, and changed us permanently. But it also taught us what we're capable of when we choose truth over comfort. That's worth something. The reading ended. People bought books, shared their own stories of surviving abuse or recognizing danger. Vanessa and I signed copies until our hands cramped, listened to stories until our hearts ached. And through it all, I felt something unexpected. Hope. Not the naive hope I'd had before, that the world was safe and people were generally good, but a tougher hope, earned through darkness, that said even when things are terrible, even when monsters live next door, there are always people brave enough to stand up and fight back. Later, as we sat in a quiet bar decompressing, Vanessa raised her glass. "To survival," she said. "To truth," I added. "To moving forward." We clinked glasses, 2 women forever bound by trauma, but no longer defined by it. Marcus Holloway would spend his life in a cell, but we were free. Free to heal, free to grow, free to build lives on truth instead of lies. The story could have ended differently so many times. Vanessa could have stayed hidden. I could have looked away. The FBI could have been too slow. Marcus could have succeeded in his final desperate plan. But none of those things happened. Instead, 2 ordinary women had faced an extraordinary monster and won. Not because we were heroes or particularly brave, but because when faced with the choice between truth and comfort, between action and complicity, we'd chosen the harder path, And that choice, repeated every day in small ways, made all the difference. 3 years later, I got an email from an inmate at a federal prison in Colorado. The name on the message made my blood run cold. Marcus Holloway. My first instinct was to delete it without reading. But curiosity, that same impulse that had made me let Vanessa into my house 5 years ago, made me click it open. The message was short. Sarah, I've read your book. I understand now why you did what you did. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that in the silence of this cell I've had time to think about the choices I made and the people I hurt. That's all. I won't contact you again. MH. I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to parse what emotion I was feeling. Anger, fear, pity. In the end, it was something more complicated, a recognition that even monsters are human, and that accountability sometimes leads to the smallest glimmer of self-awareness. I showed the email to Vanessa that evening over dinner. We lived in different cities now. She'd moved to San Francisco for a nurse practitioner program. I'd stayed in Seattle, but we made a point of visiting each other every few months. What do you think? I asked. Is it real? Or is it manipulation, one more attempt to control the narrative? Vanessa read it carefully, then set down her phone. Does it matter? Whether he's genuinely remorseful or still playing games, it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't undo David's death or my 3 years of hiding or your kidnapping. Marcus having some kind of epiphany in prison doesn't erase any of that. You're right, I said, but I think I need to respond. Not for him, but for me. To close the door on this chapter for good. What will you say? I thought about it for a moment, then pulled out my laptop and typed, Marcus, I received your message. I won't say I forgive you, because some things are beyond forgiveness, but I acknowledge that you've lost everything. Your freedom, your reputation, your future, and perhaps in that loss, you've finally found some truth about yourself. That's between you and whatever conscience you possess. As for me, I've moved on. Your actions changed my life, but they don't define it. I choose to be defined by what I did in response, standing with a survivor, choosing truth over comfort, and helping ensure you couldn't hurt anyone else. That's the story I'm living now. Don't contact me again. This is goodbye. Sarah Chen. I read it to Vanessa, who nodded. Perfect. Not cruel, not kind, just final. I hit send, then blocked his email address. That chapter was closed. The years that followed brought the normalcy we'd been chasing. Vanessa completed her program and started working at a trauma center in San Francisco, helping survivors of domestic violence. She met someone, a gentle elementary school teacher named Rachel, and they got married in a small ceremony where I was the maid of honor. Watching Vanessa in her wedding dress, laughing freely, without the shadow of fear that had followed her for so long, I cried tears of pure joy. I continued writing, published 2 more books about crime and survival, and started teaching workshops on investigative journalism. I also met someone, Alex, a therapist who specialized in trauma. He understood the scars I carried, never pushed, never questioned why I needed to sleep with a light on, or why I always sat facing the door in restaurants. We built a relationship based on honesty and patience, and eventually, I found I could trust again. Life became beautifully ordinary. Coffee shop visits, book deadlines, dinner parties with friends who knew my story, but didn't define me by it. The panic attacks became less frequent. The nightmares faded. I could drive past suburban neighborhoods without scanning for danger, but I never forgot the lesson Marcus had taught me. Though not the one he'd intended, evil doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wear a sign or cackle menacingly. It shows up in a nice smile, offers to fix your fence, brings you sympathy when you're grieving. It's the neighbor you trust, the partner who says they love you, the charming person who makes you doubt your own instincts. The real horror isn't the monster. It's how easily we miss the monster because we want to believe everyone is fundamentally good. 7 years after Marcus's conviction, I got a call from Agent Rivera. He was retired now, consulting on cold cases, but we'd stayed in touch. I thought you should know, he said. Marcus Holloway died last night. Heart attack in his cell. He was 56. The news hit me strangely. Relief, certainly. He could never hurt anyone again, but also something unexpected. Sadness. Not for Marcus exactly, but for the waste of it all. A man who'd had intelligence, charm, resources, everything he needed to build a good life, and he'd chosen to build it on lies and violence instead. How do you feel? Rivera asked. I don't know. Empty, maybe? Like the ending of a book I've been reading for years. The villain is gone, but it doesn't feel triumphant. Just done. That's normal. Closure isn't always cathartic. Sometimes it's just the absence of something that was taking up space. I called Vanessa with the news. She was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I thought I'd feel more. Happiness, relief, something. But I just feel nothing. He's been dead to me for years. This just makes it official." "Maybe that's the healthiest response," I suggested. "We've already done our mourning, our processing, our healing. Marcus dying doesn't change any of that." "No," she agreed. "It really doesn't. We didn't attend his funeral. There wasn't one. Marcus's body was cremated and his ashes scattered without ceremony. He died as he'd lived in the end, alone, having pushed away or destroyed everyone who'd ever cared about him." David Chen's parents asked if I wanted to include Marcus's death in a future edition of my book. I declined. "The book ends with his conviction," I told them, "because that's when the story really ended. His death is just a footnote, not the climax. He doesn't deserve to be the climax." A decade after that October day when everything changed, Vanessa and I returned to Portland for the anniversary of the David Chen Foundation. It had grown into a major organization, promoting ethical business practices and supporting victims of white-collar crime. David's parents had both passed away, but their daughter, David's sister, now ran the foundation. The event was at a hotel ballroom, packed with donors and supporters. Vanessa gave a speech about survival and redemption. I talked about the power of believing survivors and the importance of speaking up. But the most moving moment came when David's sister unveiled a new program, a scholarship fund for children of parents who died in corporate crimes or workplace violence. "My brother died because he tried to do the right thing," she said, her voice breaking. "He saw wrongdoing and wanted to stop it, and it cost him his life. This scholarship honors people like him, whistleblowers, truth-tellers, people who choose ethics over expediency. We can't bring David back, but we can make sure his values live on." The audience stood and applauded. Vanessa and I were crying, and we weren't alone. 10 years, and David Chen's death had created ripples that were still spreading, touching lives, making differences. Marcus had tried to erase David, to make him disappear as if he'd never existed. Instead, David's legacy was growing stronger, while Marcus's name was becoming a cautionary tale in business ethics classes and criminal justice courses. After the event, Vanessa, Rachel, Alex, and I went to dinner at a quiet restaurant. The conversation flowed easily. Rachel's students, Alex's most challenging therapy case, anonymized, of course, Vanessa's work at the trauma center, my next book project. Normal conversation, normal lives, normal people who'd once been touched by something extraordinary and terrible, but had refused to let it define them. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been if you'd never helped me?" Vanessa asked me as we waited for dessert. I considered it, honestly. Sometimes, I'd probably still be in that house on Maple Street doing the same work, living the same comfortable life. Maybe I'd have met Alex anyway, maybe not. But I wouldn't be who I am now. I wouldn't have learned what I'm capable of when pushed. I wouldn't have written the books or taught the workshops or helped other people recognize danger. Regrets? None, I said firmly. You? Vanessa looked at Rachel, at the life they'd built together. Not for a single moment. Coming back was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most important. I got my life back. My real life. Not the hiding, not the running. Just me, living openly, loving openly, existing without fear. Rachel squeezed her hand. "I'm grateful every day that you found that courage, because it brought you to me." Alex raised his glass. To courage, to survival, to the long, messy, beautiful process of healing. We clinked glasses. 4 people connected by trauma but bound by something stronger. The choice to build lives defined by resilience rather than victimhood. The story of Marcus Holloway didn't end with a dramatic confrontation or a moment of revenge. It ended quietly, with him dying alone in a cell while the people he'd tried to destroy were living full, meaningful lives. He'd wanted to erase Vanessa, to intimidate me into silence, to escape consequences for his actions. Instead, Vanessa was thriving in a career helping survivors, married to someone who cherished her. I was writing books that helped people recognize danger and building a relationship with someone who understood trauma. And David Chen's legacy was touching hundreds of lives through a foundation that promoted the very ethics Marcus had abandoned. In the end, Marcus had lost everything while we'd gained something precious, the knowledge that we could face darkness and come through it stronger. As we left the restaurant that night, walking through Portland streets that had once felt dangerous but now just felt like streets. I thought about all the people watching my YouTube channel, reading my books, listening to my story. I thought about the comments I received from survivors who'd recognized their own situations in what I'd written, who'd found the courage to leave or speak up or seek help. Marcus Holloway had been a monster, but the story wasn't really about him. It was about Vanessa, who'd found the courage to come back from the dead. It was about me, who'd chosen truth over comfort. It was about David Chen, whose integrity outlived him. It was about Agent Rivera and his team, who'd taken us seriously when they could have dismissed us. It was about every person who'd heard the story and seen something of themselves in it, who'd been inspired to speak up or believe a survivor or question their own willful blindness. Marcus was just the villain. We were the story, and our story didn't end with his death or his conviction. It continued every day we chose to live fully, love openly, and speak honestly about what we'd survived. That was the real victory. Not that the monster was caught, but that we'd refused to let him make us monsters too. We'd kept our humanity, our compassion, our ability to trust and love and build. We'd survived, but more than that, we'd lived. Standing on that Portland street corner with Vanessa, Rachel, and Alex laughing about something silly Rachel's student had said, I felt a profound sense of peace. The nightmare that had started when I discovered my neighbor's lies had transformed into something else entirely. A testament to resilience, a lesson in courage, and a reminder that even in our darkest moments, we have choices. We can choose truth. We can choose to believe survivors. We can choose to stand up even when it's terrifying. And those choices, made by ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, can change everything. The story of when I discovered my neighbor was lying about his wife's death wasn't really about the lie. It was about what happened when two women decided the truth was worth fighting for no matter the cost. And in the end, the truth had set us free.